So I was thinking about buying a new mouse pad.
Oh, wow. This is look, people don't realize this, but I know this is a big thing for you.
Wait, you didn't have to get into that. Okay. Yes, I am using an Alienware branded Funk pad.
Just to be clear, that mouse pad is older than my almost 12-year-old child.
Oh, yeah. 2006, probably. We got them when we got all those Alienware machines again. Let's move on.
Okay, so
So I was thinking about buying a new mouse pad.
Yes.
And then I made the mistake of going to Reddit.
Oh, yeah, no. Did you go to mouse reviews or did you go to is there like some
mouse pad reviews?
There's a mouse pad subreddit?
Dude, there is no limit to the subdivisions of communities that you can is there a term for this? I don't think there is a category of product that you can seek to buy these days where you can't find a community based around that category that goes into endless absurd minutia about I'll put it this way. When I got there, okay, I was going to just order like a Steel Series or whatever, the thing everybody gets.
It's like a normal person. When you go to Amazon, you search for the category, you pick the one at the top of the most popular list, and you call it a day.
And I didn't even seek this subreddit out. I just was Googling, best mouse pad, best low friction, whatever. And I'll put it this way. All of the posts you find on there with roundups of the mouse pads to get are made by companies you've never heard of.
Oh yeah. No,
it is all you have to get the X-Ray pad Aqua Control 2. It's $8.99 on AliExpress, but it'll take 2 months to get here. You got to get the one with the Amundsen fabric on it.
So I went through this when I was replacing mouse switches a few years ago and got into the mouse hacking world where people are like, hey, if you carve out these internal struts with a Dremel, you can reduce the weight of your mouse by 3 grams.
Mm-hmm.
And then that got me onto feet, like skates. But I just stopped at hey, and I just use a normal Logitech cloth pad, right? There's nothing tricky about it. So what have you learned? Your Funk pad is a hard pad. It's an old school, kind of like a cutting board material almost, right?
Yeah. I guess that's a good comparison. It's two-sided. It's got 2 textures. One side is pretty much perfectly smooth, or close enough to perfectly smooth. The other side is like noticeably coarse and rough.
So it's got a tumble to it.
Yes,
you feel a little bump. Which side do you use? Are you a smooth man or a not so much?
I was using the textured side, the rough side, for years and years. I think it might have been eating up the Teflon, the feet. I guess it's not Teflon anymore. What is the thing that all mouse feet are made out of now?
It's like PTFE or something,
yes,
but it's Teflon. It's a Teflon analog.
Oh, it is. Okay. Anyway, I think that was slowly eating up the feet on the mouse.
Huh.
So I switched to the smooth side, but it's not smooth enough.
No. Well, so I used to be a hard mouse pad guy. These things go through cycles.
Mm-hmm.
I used to be I had a Funk pad. I have a Funk pad in my garage someplace, probably still.
Okay.
If you want that, you're welcome to it. I didn't use it for 20 years, so it's not worn out.
I think I want something with more glide to it, honestly.
Okay. So I switched to a Logitech cloth mat when I switched to this G Pro, 2017, 2018. It's been a good change. It's quieter. The mouse just kind of moves. I don't have to think about it. It's lighter, it's faster, it's better, stronger. What are you going to do? Are you going to order some AliExpress mouse pad, or are you going to just get something at Best Buy?
I think what I'm going to do is continue not making a decision and just ignoring the problem because this pad still works technically.
Can I make an alternate suggestion?
What's that?
Why don't you buy one of each of the mouse pads, the $8.99 AliExpress, or maybe buy 2 of them. They're $8.
Hang on, I see where you're going with this. Are you suggesting I just replicate one of these review threads that already exists on here?
I'm just saying this to me, this has the sweet sound of content to me.
Your brain is as broken as mine is. Well, let me just close by saying there are people on there doing tests of these mouse pads under varying barometric conditions.
Well, I mean, if your humidity and air pressure are up, then that is definitely going to impact the performance of your mouse pad, Brad.
I don't know that I'm going to do humidity tests on a mouse pad. I'm sorry.
I expected more commitment from you, to be honest. Welcome to Brad and Will Made a Tech Pod. I'm Will.
I'm Brad.
Brad,
Hello.
It's time once more to journey back.
Yes. Dust off the trusty time machine here. And by time machine, I mean the RSS feed for this podcast.
Yep.
Which, when we think about something like an old magazine issue review episode, I pull up and Control F on the word magazine.
Wait, on your computer?
Yeah.
Really? You have a bunch of magazines downloaded on your computer?
No. The RSS feed of our podcast. I pull up when we talk about one of these episodes, I pull up the RSS feed and I was like, when was the last time we did a magazine issue episode?
It's been a while.
To the best of my Control Fing ability, I think it was last November, so we're coming up on a year now.
Yeah, there you go. Well, so I was watching friends of the site. You might be familiar with this website, Giant Bomb. They're playing Daikatana right now.
I've heard of it, yes.
Yeah. And I was watching that yesterday, and as a result of that, I started digging through old gaming magazines, looking at Daikatana coverage, because, man, they are not having a good time playing that game, I don't think. It seems like Jeff Grubb is broken as a result of this.
I believe that. At the same time, I feel like a bit of a reappraisal has been underway for that game, maybe a little bit, but also it's probably grading on a severe curve.
Well, so I remember playing that game when it came out and trying to review it, I think for Ars Technica.
Ooh, yikes.
And I played it every night for like 5 or 6 days and got maybe through the first world, and finally just sent a note back to the other guys, was like, I'm not going to do this. This is bad. Like, this isn't, my time is worth more than this.
You know, some reviewers would say that was enough to review the game.
I mean, look, we were definitely of the, hey, if this game, like, we reviewed so few games that it was weird for us to review a game just to dump on it because it was bad. Like,
sure.
we didn't have a process for that, really.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I've kind of been in that situation where it's like, I mean, that's kind of how it was at Giant Bomb to a degree. It was like, okay, we can't cover everything, so what we review is going to be like an act of curation, basically. It's like merely by choosing to review this game is sort of recommending it, or at least saying, hey, this is notable in some way.
Yeah, at ours, our approach was like we reviewed maybe one game a week, right? Maybe 2 on a big week. So it was like it was very much a, hey, if we're talking about this, it's noteworthy. And I guess, like, with my modern editorial sense, Daikatana feels noteworthy in that way. But also nobody needed us to tell them that Daikatana was bad in 1998, 1999, whatever it was.
I'll say real quick before I move on, I think the reappraisal of that game is of the fixed version, because people have like fan modded it into a better working state. I don't know if Grubb is using those mods or not, but there's like mods that fix the companion AI and stuff like that, and that all seems pretty crucial. Yeah,
Grubb is in a masochism trip and is not doing that.
I see. Okay, so the people saying like, maybe it's not that bad, or they're basically talking about like the game it was meant to be, not what shipped.
So the thing I had always heard about Daikatana is that the first world is the worst, right? And then it opens up and gets better as you play more.
Always put your worst foot forward.
Yeah, it was a weird choice, right? But yeah. So anyway, I don't know. I'm not. The best way for me to engage with Daikatana content is to watch someone else suffer. But the second best way for me to engage with Daikatana content was to read old next gen magazines about Daikatana. The year was 1997.
1997, a fine vintage.
The month was December, which in magazine world was probably actually like August or September was when they were writing this.
Sure.
There's usually like a couple of months lead. Like usually the magazines came out the month before that it actually was, like the newsstand date was a month earlier than the actual date.
Right. And
yeah.
And would this have been the phone book issue for the year?
This would have been a big fat holiday issue. Yeah.
And well, so it's interesting. And sure enough, it is a 200-page issue.
Mm-hmm.
Not like the slightest bit holiday gift guidey or sort of consumer focused. There's like, I mean, we'll get into it. There's articles, and there are multiple articles in here about like making your own games, about game development, about like nascent indie games.
Well, so Next Gen was another Imagine title like Maximum PC and PC Gamer, and later PSN. Well, PSN was out by then, I think. Nintendo Power was for a long time. The official Dreamcast magazine, the official Xbox magazines, both Imagine or / Future jams. And PC Accelerator was the other one around this time. So this was the holiday issues were big because people bought a bunch of ads for their games in the holiday issues, and then like they'd sell more ads than they had pages for in the normal 96-page books, and they'd blow them up to like this might have been the year that the PC Gamer holiday issue was like 250 pages. But it was big. And next gen always kind of positioned itself as like an industry, like a consumer industry bent. Right.
It was very much supposed to be it was positioned as the thinking person's video game magazine.
Yeah. For a long time, like Bill Gates was a known reader of Next Gen magazine.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh. I didn't know he cared enough about video games to follow them outside of their business efforts.
He just wanted to know about the business efforts.
Yeah, fair. Yeah. But I mean, I guess that illustrates the point. Like they talk a lot more about hardware launches and specs, game development practices, business trends.
Like there's sections about marketing and how games are marketed and stuff like that.
Yes, but there's also a lengthy interview in here with a guy from Core, the Tomb Raider makers, with a bunch of shots of a Lara Croft model. So
yeah, and some kind of sexist comments from that dude, but
it's definitely not like a Lad Mag vibe in that interview or anything necessarily. But
this was definitely Lad Mag time, right? Just to be clear, it was like Maximum was the magazine that was driving a lot of innovation on the newsstand, and I don't just mean pictures of scantily clad women. I mean like magazine design stuff was being driven by Maxim because they were doing really well.
Right.
The reason this issue is interesting is they have a couple of hardware stories that are like tech trend stories. One is the cover story, which, by the way, just talk about the cover for a second. It's a white cover with a plug, a North American 3-prong plug and a power plug plugged into it. And that's it.
Yeah.
It says Next Generation, the game machine of the year. And then I think there's a fold out probably that we don't get.
It's on the last page of this PDF. I think that may have gotten moved around. What do you call that? Is that a gatefold?
Yeah, it's a gatefold or a fold out.
Is that where the inside or the front cover folds out?
Yeah, they could do that on Next Gen because I don't think they had a disc, but maybe they did.
No, I don't believe they ever had a disc. They did have I think we've talked about this many times. They had extremely nice paper stock. If you've never held a Next Generation magazine before, the cover was thicker than any magazine I have ever touched in my life.
Well, no, they did have a disc. I don't know how they did the gatefold. That was weird.
Oh, was that later?
This might be. They might have shipped two different versions of the magazine too. Because they might have shipped a different newsstand. No. They on page 4. There's a disc contents.
I didn't realize Chris Charlo was EIC at this time.
Yeah, so Charlo was EIC. He went on. He's been at Microsoft forever now, and is the Xbox guy. He does indie games at Xbox these days.
Fitting actually, as we'll get into. There's some like fairly forward-looking stuff about the need for indie games in this 1997 issue.
Very much so. But the point about Next Gen was like EGM. It was a cross-platform, and GamePro. It was a cross-platform title. It covered all the consoles, all the arcade stuff. It covered future stuff. It covered PC
hardware.
Yeah, and like Next Gen put online as like the 5th or 6th pillar of gaming because they felt like online was going to kind of be its own thing, which was, it turns out, probably right.
Yeah, maybe we'll save this for the end, but there's a straight up calendar of events at the back of the issue.
I missed that.
Literally like a month long. Here's what's going up on the website every day this month.
Oh, well, this was it. This was 97 would have been. This was before I started at Future, but they were investing in web because they were looking at game coverage on stuff like Sugar Shack and Blues News and Voodoo Extreme and stuff like that, and early GameSpot, I guess, at this point. And we're like, oh, we should be doing this. So anyway,
you could show up on December 10th for Otaku Christmas, for example.
Is this when the magazine features went up on the website?
Maybe. I don't know. ImagineGames.com. Be there.
Oh, this was when it was all on ImagineGames.com still. Wow. Okay. So they portaled everything into one big.
Oh, yes. That I guess Otaku Christmas is technically a SaturnWorld.com story.
So you might know Imagine Games by its later name, the Imagine Games Network, or IGN.
Yep, I sure do.
Yeah. They spun that off, and then we had to make all our own websites again.
Okay, it's good to hear that, because I had always understood IGN to stand for Imagine Games Network, but when you look that up these days, I think that's like kind of lost to history.
Yeah, it's just like LG doesn't stand, it stands for Life's Good and not Lucky Gold Star anymore.
Right. Yeah. Yes. Anyway, but yeah, it's a very stark cover, like you said. It's just like literally a field of white with a small graphic and some text on it. Like they got artsy a little bit with their covers, or it's sort of like the New Yorker of video game magazines a little bit.
It was very designy. They were also the first magazine in like this space that I remember that wasn't like a design magazine or something to do a matte cover.
Yeah.
They did a matte wash on the cover and a thicker stock, and it felt like one of those magazines you see at like the nice newsstand that has like the design magazines.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway.
Yep.
So where do you want to start?
You should probably start with the cover story, which is like kind of the big deal here, which is, I guess they did a yearly console shootout where they, like this kind of is right there with the tone of the magazine we've been describing. It was like a very soup to nuts appraisal of where the console is at in the market. It's like, hey, what are their marketing efforts like right now? Like, what's the quality of the software they're delivering? Like, how well are the specs on this console aging? Et cetera, et cetera. What's the prognosis for the future? And we're going to score all these things.
I don't actually know if they did this every year. Sometimes one of the magazine tricks is that you'd say you do something every year, okay, but then you just maybe do it once and it doesn't work, or it does work. Because
there's definitely language in the intro of this feature, sort of like for this year's annual console roundup, kind of. But the reason they get into that is the big deal here is they've included the PC in this feature for the first time, and they're straight up going like, why are we putting the PC in this console shootout? Well, because now the PC actually is the best way to play games.
Yeah, and it's specifically because of 3D acceleration, right? Yeah. This was the year that the 3DFX Voodoo kind of took off. This is the year that we saw Quake, GL Quake, and a handful of other 3D games. But this is the first year that like games on the PC weren't just for weirdos. It seems like from their perspective.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they do get into actually, I think it might be in the indie games article. And one of these features, they do get into the era of like Wolfenstein 3D. They're like, this was like kind of the first salvo of like PC games that truly mattered or could compete or surpass console games.
Well, or we're selling more than just like some Ziploc bags at computer shows. Right.
Yeah.
And it's also worth mentioning, this is around the time GT Interactive is advertising through this magazine, the Quake publisher, the retail Quake publisher.
Right.
But we hadn't seen like Bass Pro Games and Deer Hunter and stuff like that hadn't come out yet. So like games hadn't reached Walmart yet for the PC.
Right.
Anyway.
Yeah.
The interesting, one of the things that struck me first is that at this point, the oldest console that they talk about here, which is, I think, the Saturn, was 2.5 years old, and they described this as mid-cycle.
Oh yeah, no, we'll get into it later. There are multiple references in this issue to the forthcoming Dreamcast, which doesn't have the name yet. It's still Project Dural at this point, but there are very explicit signs that the Saturn follow-up is imminent in this issue. And the Saturn, like you said, is 2 years old at this point. Like, it really struck me of like, man, these things just kind of like came and went back then.
Yeah. I mean, also they were cheap. The inflation has had a toll, right?
Yeah, but, sure. The Saturn less so. The Saturn famously, that was part of the reason it sank, was $399 in 1995 was pretty rough, and Sony ate their lunch by going $100 cheaper.
Well, but by the time we're reading this issue, everything is $150. The N64, the Saturn, and the PlayStation are all $150 MSRP according to the magazine.
You're right.
Yeah.
Oh, I totally glossed over that fact. That's wild. Because this is also only like 2 years after the PlayStation came out.
Yeah. It was like a year and a half after the PlayStation came out, right?
You're totally right. That's another thing I have to like recalibrate my memory of, because price drops are like barely a thing these days. We're almost 4 years into the PS5 and it's still the same price as when it came out.
Yeah,
kind of more expensive in some ways. Like it's.
Well, I mean, they were cheaper. These were cheaper, easier to manufacture machines at the time.
Of course.
And also, I think they were definitely doing, with the exception probably of Nintendo, Sony and Sega were definitely playing hey, can we loss lead some hardware in and then sell a whole bunch of $20 discs?
You're totally right. This was squarely before the era of, hey, we're going to make actual profit on the consoles we're selling on the hardware, and not we're going to eat cost on each one just to sell games.
And just to be clear, $149 in December of 1997 is $290 today.
Oh, okay, all right.
So we're not that far off what the price is.
Yeah, because like $250 for the Series S is still considered sort of like the budget offering. Anyway, they like I said, they rated these consoles. Surprisingly, I mean, they kind of gush about the PlayStation, but then they still give it a final score of 3.5 stars, which is the same they give to the N64, which they view as not quite DOA, but like not in good shape.
Yeah, like it's interesting because one of the things that I had forgotten too is that at this period of time when the APIs were new and people were writing directly to Metal a lot of times and stuff like that, like there was an expectation that people were gonna figure out more about how the consoles worked over time, and you juice more hardware out, more software features out of the hardware.
Like the intro to this thing is actually really perceptive. Like they make that exact point of like, hey, the hardware specs are less sexy on these than when these consoles shipped, but the games are going to get better from here because everybody has learned the consoles now, and we're going to get more interesting and better looking games in the back half of these things.
Well, and they also make the point that this is the time at which people stop playing around with the new graphical whiz bangs and kind of dig in and actually make games, right? The back half of that console cycle back in the old days was, hey, we understand how this machine works, and it's not just a nightmare just getting it up and running and shipped. Now we can actually work on the game some
and innovate, do things you haven't seen before. And as a corollary to all that, in this intro, where literally where they are declaring the PC like the best thing to play games on now, they caution like pretty strongly, like, hey, a lot of the games are probably going to suck. There's going to be a big flood of games that look amazing and play like shit on the PC now that 3DFX cards are out there.
Yeah, they literally. So along with each of these write-ups on each of the consoles, they pick 10 games that it's like they call them biggest games of the season, which is that to me is a mixture of, hey, here's the stuff we think is going to sell and have impact, and the stuff we're going to be excited about, but maybe not the best.
Yeah.
So on the Nintendo side, it's like GoldenEye, which was already out or out by the time you read this issue. It's hard to tell. Zelda 64, which still didn't have a name, right? F-Zero 64, Yoshi's Story 64, Diddy Kong, Conker's Quest, which didn't ship for a long time after this, if I recall.
That was late. Also, Conker's Quest never came out. I think that morphed into Conker's Bad Fur Day.
Oh, okay.
The edgy one.
But like on the PC side, the games that they're talking about, I'm scrolling desperately here. Sorry.
PC Battlezone, Blade Runner. Wow, the adventure game, I guess so. Yeah, the point and click game. Daikatana.
That's how I came to this issue, actually, is I was searching Daikatana on archive.org, and yeah.
Duke Nukem Forever?
That was a game that didn't ship for another 10 years almost.
12. Wasn't it 2009 that came out?
It was late.
After?
Yeah.
I think it was 09.
I was, maybe.
Yeah, Heavy Gear.
G-Police, the bundle pack-in game that came with every 3D accelerator you bought in 1997 or 98. That's a bad game.
Yes, but Jedi Knight, Quake 2, StarCraft, and Tomb Raider 2 are the other games here. Those are all like pretty certified.
Dude, I'm going to tell you, Heavy Gear also rips.
Okay, I've never played Heavy Gear.
Heavy Gear was like a mech game that you didn't have to manage heat. It was like a arcadey fast mech game. It was real good.
Anyway,
Battlezone fine too.
I've heard that. Just to wrap up here real quick, like I said, they do component scores here for like the PlayStation gets a 3 for demonstrated hardware power, for example, 3.5 for current software library. Anyway, PlayStation and N64 both 3.5 stars. The Saturn is basically just treated as moribund at this point. Like they basically just say, hey, this thing's on the way out. Like the write up. It begins, Sega is at a critical point is how they start this. Yeah. Saturn gets a 2 stars overall.
And it's interesting because the Saturn, like the story on the Saturn is that it was 2D hardware, originally to be a 2D hardware, and then they jammed some 3D stuff in at the last minute, right? Yeah,
they mentioned that in here. Saturn was never really cut out for its competition. Originally planned as the ultimate 2D system, a replacement for the aging Genesis. 3D support was added at high cost after the company learned of Sony's plans. It was bad at 3D at the time 3D was emerging, and it launched at a way too high price. It was doomed from the beginning.
Yeah. It's interesting how like they didn't exactly know how to cover 3D at this point. It seems like, like it's hard to remember now, but like going from, hey, this is a picture, this is a 2D picture that we can represent on the screen, and we'll flash those at 60 frames a second, to, hey, in this Voodoo Graphics write up, like in the PC write up, they're talking about 3 different 3D accelerator companies, and it's like 3DFX, Rendition, NVIDIA. I think there's an ATI section in here.
I think so.
Power VR. No, they don't talk about ATI at all. Because ATI was still making basically Rage 2s at that point, and Rage Pro hadn't come out and wasn't very good anyway. But in the 3DFX section, they talk about APIs, right? They talk about Glide and OpenGL and Direct3D coming. They talk about mip mapping and Z buffering and perspective correct texture filtering, which none of the consoles had at this point, right? This PlayStation was just garage shading, I thought. It had mip maps.
Did the N64 have it? Maybe, I'm not sure.
Oh, N64 might have. But like these are, I would describe these as base level 3D features to have a 3D console.
Oh yeah.
The best part about this is they have a little tease at the end about the Voodoo 2, which is expected sometime in the next year, maybe as soon as the end of Q1. And it says, imagine playing Quake at the frame rate of your monitor's refresh rate.
Imagine that.
So like at this point, this whole thing about the PC, like the thing that they've seen that's really good isn't a Tomb Raider port or G-Police or Virtua Racing. It's Quake. This is GL Quake has made this the winner for this year.
Sure. And Quake 2 was just about to come out at the time of this publishing.
Yeah, Quake 2, like it literally came out between the time this issue was written and when the magazine probably was like the newsstand date.
Yeah. I have to mention, excuse me, at the end of this whole piece, they're like, but wait, welcome to the next level. Here's the Dreamcast, although again, not called the Dreamcast at this point. It was still Dural, which was just a working title, which I was like, wait, well, Dreamcast was Project Katana. And then sure enough, I went and looked, and at some point they changed the working title from Dural to Katana before it became Dreamcast. Anyway, they got all the specs here. Like you were saying, like the Saturn is barely over 2 years old here. They have all of the hard specs for the Dreamcast. Granted, the Saturn was like stillborn, so they had to follow it up quickly.
Do you think that Sega was dumping this information out?
I'm pretty sure there's a reference in here to this coming from a development manual, like a dev kit manual.
There's a news story that says, hey, dev kits are out now.
Yes, I was going to refer to that. I'll zoom earlier. This is on page 24 of the PDF. I don't know what page of the magazine. They don't list a page number.
26. The magazine's off by 2 for some reason. I don't know why.
Anyway, this is a little news hit about Dreamcast development kits going out to developers. Developers work on Power VR accelerated PCs. Oh, and await development kits. I'm sorry, they're still on PCs at this point, but there's like an interesting line in here. Sega has informed these developers that if they develop with a Pentium 2 200 in mind, then the game will work on Dural. Because the system uses a Microsoft OS, developers can start work early on a Pentium 2 based PC accelerated with a Power VR card. Like, it's just kind of interesting. Just as like the first example of a console like following PC hardware like pretty closely, although different CPU architecture.
It's well, and it's also interesting because presumably Sega was just torching their existing Saturn sales because they knew that they weren't losing anything.
Right. Like who cares if we're out here talking about the successor? Nobody's buying it anyway.
Like there's an interesting glimpse into how people talked about this stuff. Because like if you look at the specs for their PC on their PC column in that same article, they don't use the right names for the CPUs.
Huh.
Right? Like they list 3 systems configurations, and the minimum is a Pentium 2 Pro 233, which is not, there's Pentium 2s and there were Pentium Pros, but there's no Pentium 2 Pro.
Well, I was going to say there is no such thing.
The intermediate is a Pentium 2 Pro 266, and the ultimate is a Pentium 2 Pro 300. So they don't talk about like K6s, which a K6 200 was the entry level at that point, I think, if I recall.
Right.
It's like, and there was no variation in sound cards and graphics cards because like there were only a limited number of vendors, limited number of chips that were worth having at that point. I think like, hey, just build this for a Pentium 200 for the Dural stuff is fascinating though.
Yeah.
Like I mean, at the same time, on the other side, you had Nintendo saying, hey, if you want to make a Nintendo game, you got to buy this $500,000 SGI workstation so you can test it. Right. Which is like, it's hard to understand, hard to imagine why Nintendo had problems that generation when the Sega and Sony are just like, yo, here's a PC. Right. $2,000.
Yeah. Weird. Actually, there's a news story about that we'll get to in a second here. But the Dreamcast was two Hitachi 32-bit RISC chips, just for comparison. If you're like, you were developing on a Pentium 2 200, but SH25, I believe, is the name of that CPU.
Message 4 is what they say in the tech specs here.
28 megahertz.
Oof.
For the CPUs in the Dreamcast. So real quick, before we move on from console news here, there's also a news hit here about Nintendo dropping the prices of cartridges.
Yeah, I remember this. Like, you got your N64 in what, like
2006 is when it came out? Or sorry, it's not 1996. Excuse me.
Yeah, like it was hot. It was hard to find in Christmas. I remember getting mine just after Christmas in 97. And like the cartridges were $80 for Wave Racers and Mario 64. It was really phenomenally expensive.
Yeah. Yeah. So this they have dropped the price here. The new average price for N64 software will be from $49 to $59 at retail. This constitutes roughly a 15% price cut. You can do the math there. There's this an amazing quote from Peter Main here. Business is booming. New prices not only show our competitive edge, but also are our way of saying thanks to consumers for helping Nintendo claim nearly 53% of the total U.S. video game industry.
Game Boy was still real hot here, right?
I was going to say there's so much marketing spin in that quote. I cannot believe it. Like, there's no way the N64 accounts for an appreciable portion of that 53%. And also the idea of a corporation dropping prices out of the goodness of its heart.
Well, so
like, come on, man.
Did Nintendo manufacture all the cartridges for Nintendo 64 games?
I know they did on the earlier consoles. I can't say for sure that on the N64 it was the case, but I have to assume it was because, yes, that was absolutely the thing. That was one of the big things on the NES where they were like gouging. They're not gouging. I mean, they were getting even more from third parties by requiring the third parties to let them make the cartridges.
It's the old Stanley Kubrick trick right. Of writing the movie, directing the movie, and renting props to the movie production. Yeah.
Or maybe the Apple thing. I don't know. Just like, control every step of the chain.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, like this clearly more of a move to like try to fight. I mean, they say that here literally, like Sony's selling games for $20 now. You can't keep doing this. Like,
it's interesting because this is kind of the beginning of the Nintendo. Hey, we're a first party only platform.
Kind of. Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Because like they have a quote from Capcom president Bill Gardner, who says it was unreasonable to look at N64 from a third party publisher's standpoint previously. Now there is room for everyone to make money and to bring more great games to the system.
And sure enough, Resident Evil 2 for the N64 happened not terribly long after this. Well, somewhat long after. But anyway.
At the same time, they also call out Sony selling greatest hits discs for $20, which was like, I remember buying a lot of games, not necessarily for the PlayStation, but for other platforms on that $20. Hey, I'll wait a year. This is a thing I care about, but not that much. I'll grab it when it's $20. Like I got Eco and Shadows of the Colossus in those. Oh yeah. The next generation.
Yeah. Heck of a deal.
Yeah. Last thing is on this future console stuff. No mention of PlayStation 2.
Oh, you're right. But actually, I'm sorry. I flagged this elsewhere. Let me see if I can find it.
There's a little hit someplace else, right?
It is on page 19 of the magazine. It's literally the tiniest sidebar in this entire issue. It's on a page. We'll probably talk about this in a little bit. It's on a page about holographic storage, which if you followed hardware in the late 90s, you definitely remember reading about the promise of holographic storage. But there's a little sidebar, PlayStation 2 speculation.
That's pretty good.
They straight up have got, I mean, it's not hard specs, it's more ranges, but they've got like pretty decent info about the PlayStation 2 specs here. And it's just kind of shocking to me. Maybe it's because it's rumors that they didn't want to go too hard on it, but like they've got info about the next PlayStation here and they didn't stick it in that future console feature story. They just put it in this news section in a tiny box.
So I will tell you why that happens. Because usually you lay out the features early because they're done early.
Okay.
And once they're laid out, you're not going to add stuff in if it's not real important.
Sure.
The news section is generally the last thing that gets done. And this one, like looking at the way this page is, they got the late tip here from some developer who'd gotten a dev kit and we're like, well, there's a sidebar on page 17. We can just jam it in here. Yeah. And that's what they did.
Yeah. I mean, there's even a big empty space below it as if they didn't have enough to fill the whole space or whatever. There probably weren't dev kits at this point. I would guess this was like still in R&D
briefings. Probably.
Yeah. Because it was still like 3 years out from launching.
Also, no mention of Microsoft in this because nobody had any idea that Microsoft was going to do anything at this point.
Yep.
So should we talk about underground games?
Yes, underground. Which way to the underground is this feature on page 76 of the issue?
It's like a London Underground map.
Yeah. Although Next Gen was entirely US based, right?
Yeah, they were in Brisbane, or they might have been in Burlingame at this point still. And also all American for them. Well, like there were a couple of British writers there.
Yeah. I mean, it's on the one hand, it's easy to like laugh and roll your eyes at the term underground games, but on the other hand, like the gist or like the spirit of this article is like 100% correct.
Well, we didn't have like indie wasn't. I don't know that I'd heard anybody say. I guess I'd heard about indie rock by then, probably for a while.
Sure. I mean, 97, like this is way past like grunge happening and stuff. Like
but like it was kind of like grunge and like that all fit into like college rock to me, right? Like stuff you hear on the college radio station. And I don't know that I had heard, like, I don't know that we talked about indie. I'd be interested to see what the first, like, hey, here's the publisher, here's the idea of doing this without commercial support from a publisher or large entity.
Yeah, I mean, I think, if we want to get technical, I probably heard the term indie rock like after I got to college in like 97, 98 and like met people who were listening to like Archers of Loaf and Superchunk and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But this article starts, the explosion of independent music and films has meant more than just a new business model. It's been the long overdue invitation for creative minds to crash the corporate party. So is the game industry ready for a new guest list? And if so, who's on it? But anyway, like the point is like, a lot of indie film and music was big in the late 90s, which obviously is their springboard here for like, hey, like games need some kind of like outsider art, small development scene as well.
Yeah. And you know what, when I think about it, it was Clerks and Reservoir Dogs and stuff like that was where I first heard indie.
Right.
So yeah, they talk about this and they call it, they talk about independent spirit. They talk about lo-fi production. They talk about all the kind of harbingers of the early indie stuff. And then they ask why the game industry failed to produce an independent movement without saying, hey, to make a game on the N64, you have to have a $500,000 dev kit. Which I think is really funny because maybe they didn't realize that at this point.
Yeah. Well, they do present like the kind of like, what are the hurdles here? Need for financial return, steep entry cost. Consumers like mainstream games is one they have here, which definitely not wrong at this time. Let's see here. The industry is too young. Games just aren't art. Well, these are not their arguments, of course. These are like, what are some of the common complaints or obstacles to a smaller game, like indie scene forming?
Well, and like the cost of production is really high, right? Like just build it. Like there weren't free 3D editors at this point.
Oh,
right. Like if you wanted, you needed Maya Max or something that cost thousands of dollars to make a 3D game at this point.
Yeah, it's weird they didn't roll this into this feature to me. But if you go back to page 3029, maybe this is like a regular column, I guess, that they were saving this for. Toolbox, the products that build your favorite games. Oh, I'm sorry. Actually, there are two of these. I'm mixing this one up, but I'll just go ahead and talk about this one. There's a different section with some other development tools. This is where they're talking about some new game dev tools. Torch.
Yeah, this was a VRML renderer. Yes. I don't think anybody ever made anything with this.
Yeah, it's let's see. At its heart, Torch is simply a very fast VRML engine with some game-oriented tweaks. So I guess it was an attempt to like make VRML work as a game engine.
Yeah, to like, well, we didn't have a whole lot of game engines at this point either. Quake was something you could license, and I guess Unreal you could license probably by now.
No, Unreal came out in 98, so like big Unreal licensing was still 2-3 years away.
Yeah, but it wasn't like there were 20 engines on the market. This was, hey, here's a thing that will handle collision and rendering for you, and then you can attach game nodes to each of the objects. Kind of is what it sounded like.
They very much make that point in that Underground Games article. They talk about it very much from the perspective of you're going to have to write your own engine. Like, what do you need to make a game? Well, you need to know how to code an engine.
Yeah,
which obviously pretty big obstacle
that limited a lot of accessibility. It turns out.
Yes, VRML. Virtual reality markup language, right? What those, for people who don't remember, that was like an early attempt to get 3D graphics into your web browser.
Yep. Or just have a shared. This was early metaverse stuff. This was an idea that you could have a shared markup language that would describe 3D spaces, not just flat text.
Yeah.
It didn't go anywhere, it turns out. my favorite quote in this is at the end. They talk about shortcomings. They like in the conclusion, they're saying, despite all these shortcomings, New Fire has created a fast and flexible engine with Torch and a carefully thought out and, relatively speaking, easy to use design tool set with Catalyst. Best of all, it's cheap as hell. $2,000 for a 1-seat license.
Practically giving it away.
Well, but I mean, compared to Quake, where like you had an upfront cost of a couple $100,000 and royalty payments, it is very cheap. But like for one guy sitting alone in his basement who wanted to make a game that spoke to him, kind of expensive.
Right. And that's exactly what they're arguing for in that Underground Games piece is small, either single individual people or small teams making games that speak to them, that like come from the heart. Like they interview Kenji Eno in here, for example, you know, like as somebody who is like making games their way.
Who's Kenji Eno? You know, just for people who don't know.
He made D.
Oh,
is the game that comes to mind for me. I've never Warp was his company. He's passed away a number of years ago, unfortunately. Enemy Zero is another one. He was big on the 3DO and maybe on the Dreamcast. He was kind of like a like auteur-ish, I guess I would say, like almost like a Kojima or David Lynch type of figure of making very unusual games that clearly are coming from like a specific creative impulse.
Like a predecessor to like a Suda
kind of, yes.
Yeah,
sure.
Okay.
Sure. They talked to Dave Taylor in here, crack.com.
Oh yeah.
Abuse. Remember that? Yep. Abuse is an amazing game.
I've never actually played that, I don't think.
Oh, it's great. It's got 360 degree like mouse aiming, you know, like you just it's an Abuse if you have not played it. It's a 2D side scrolling shooter, kind of Contra-ish from the PC from the 90s, but you use you can aim 360 degrees around your character. It's awesome. But cool. Anyway, Dave Taylor famously worked for id Software for quite a while as well, in like the Doom 2 era. But Crack.com is portrayed here as another like grassroots like garage developer.
Yeah, I mean there was a lot of like, that's the way like God Games was kind of portrayed too, as like, hey, we're an unpublisher publisher. Crack.com made fun stuff.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting that they put id in this category because they were like, hey, this is 7 people made Quake, right?
Right. I mean, obviously by this time id is like the biggest thing out there in PC games, but yes, they were famously just some knuckleheads that got together. Myst is listed here.
Well, I mean, that makes sense.
Yeah, I actually watched is it ours that does the War Stories series on YouTube? Have you seen those?
I think so, yeah.
Oh, they're so good. I just started watching them recently. I'm pretty sure it's ours, Technica. Forgive me if it's somebody else, but the only ones I've watched are with, oh God, why am I blanking on the other founder of Naughty Dog besides Jason Rubin? Andy, I cannot remember his name. Anyway, he was the programmer of.
Oh, okay.
It's mostly about Crash Bandicoot, but like he goes into like 30 minutes of extreme technical detail about how they made Crash Bandicoot work on the PlayStation. It's incredible. But I watched another one with Rand Miller about Myst recently, which is also fantastic because he also goes into like the HyperCard roots of Cyan.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Like Myst was their first game in color.
Oh,
like
wow.
all of Cyan's previous games before Myst were like black and white HyperCard games. And like Myst, you can see how Myst just kind of grew out of that with better technology. And he talks about the 3D rendering they used and all kinds of stuff. Anyway, those videos are great. But
Andy Gavin,
yes.
Who you're talking about from Naughty Dog.
Yes. Yeah, Myst is portrayed here as and I think it probably was just a few people, right? But Myst demonstrated the potential of games as an artistic medium, is how they put it here.
It's interesting because one of the things they didn't quite get to, they danced all around this in this article, is the idea that indies will serve niches that are smaller than mainstream publishers might want to deal with. As like, I don't think they'd quite gotten to the point that like one day there wouldn't be a mainstream AAA RTS, right?
Right.
And as a result, they wouldn't get to the idea that, oh, right, there's a small 6-person team can make an RTS that hits the right buttons for RTS fans, then there will be a huge market for that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah,
it's weird.
It's a pretty prescient article, you know, pretty forward looking. They pretty much hit the nail on the head with this one.
What else we got? You want to talk?
See here.
I saw a couple. Can we do a brief digression into an ad?
Sure.
So on page 128 or 130 is the Philips Scuba.
Okay.
It's a head-mounted display that you had like a full ensconcing of your ears, and it looks like a neoprene interface for your face. And you just plugged your console into it.
Oh, yeah. I saw this and I just assumed it was another crappy early attempt at a VR headset. I did not realize this is literally just a display for your existing consoles.
This is literally, hey, you want an 80-inch display for your Nintendo 64? Boom, we can do that.
That'll look great right in front of your face.
I mean, this looks... I never, ever saw one of these. Like, I think this was gone before I was in a place to see this kind of stuff. It was a weird time.
The ad says Philips Magnavox. Did they merge?
Philips Magnavox was the same company for a long time. Yeah.
Was it?
Yeah.
Hang on.
I feel like Philips bought Magnavox at some point.
I need to Google Philips Scuba and see if you can. Is it like possible to get your hands on one of these days? I kind of doubt it.
Maybe this is the way to play. I'm curious if there must be LCDs in it, right?
I was going to say, what else could it be, right? The first review that comes up, Chrome is throwing a big red flashing dangerous site security error. I don't know about clicking through to this one.
There's a parts only eBay listing for $70.
Huh.
And it says it's conditioned for parts are not working.
Oh boy. Okay. Probably not many units sold of this thing.
This is the kind of thing to look for at the electronics flea market. If you ever see one of these, grab it.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Steve sent us photos of the flea market last week. There were a bunch of Sun Microsystems hardware there. I'm sad I did not see that stuff. Anyway.
Well, and then the follow up on how you get that stuff booting was enough to make me not ever want to fool with Sun Microsystems hardware.
I would not be insane enough to actually buy a Sun workstation, but I would think about it.
Can we talk about the Vectrex column by Stephen Kent?
Sure.
This is we're going one layer deeper. This is like the inception of this podcast.
You mean the Virtual Boy of the 80s?
Yeah, this is their look back at old hardware and old things in the games industry. And the thing that's interesting about this is it cracks. I've always heard the myth that the Vectrex existed because General Consumer Electronics got a deal on those vector monitors from some medical company.
Interesting. I had not heard that.
Which is not true, according to Stephen Kent. Who was writing a history book on video games.
Sure.
Vectrex remains one of the weirdest things ever to me.
Yeah. I mean, like vector games were somewhat big in arcades up to this point. Yeah,
that Star Wars vector game remained a mainstay for a long time.
Yeah, that's the main one I think of.
Battlezone.
Yeah, you could definitely see. I mean, this was 82 that the Vectrex came out. You could definitely see somebody just thought, hey, we should make a home thing like those arcade things.
Yeah. It was $200. I didn't realize it was that expensive.
Yeah,
that's a lot in the 80s.
Yeah, well, it came with its own screen, to be fair.
That's true.
Not just a console.
I like the pitch, which is, hey, the kids and the parents like this because it didn't hog the TV. So the kids can plug this in someplace else in the room and play their games.
I can see it
while they're not taking over the TV, which is like, that's a good selling point.
I can see it. Man, was the Vectrex really put out by Milton Bradley?
They bought GCE.
Okay. God, remember Milton Bradley?
Yeah, Milton Bradley. They were hot on Simon is why they bought the Vectrex, because they were like, computers, eh?
That worked out well for them, I'm sure.
Simon's pretty good, man.
Yeah, sure.
My kid has they make a small size Simon now that like they sell at Target in the dollar bin. My kid has one. Yeah.
Oh, it's heartwarming to know that the Simon name is still out there.
Simon, did you have a Merlin? Merlin was the one I had.
No, I never had any of those.
Oh, Merlin was fun. You were probably a little bit too young for that. So I think by the time you would have been old enough to play with those, they would have been not interesting.
Yeah.
For Game Boy related reasons.
I mean, I was 4 or 5 when the 2600 showed up.
Yeah.
But it was, at that point, anything that was not a legit video game was like, whatever, man.
I feel like I went to a friend's 6th or 7th birthday and he had a 2600 in Pitfall. And I was like, this is the greatest thing. Look, the game just keeps going. This is incredible.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's see. Any other, what else we got?
A couple of other quick hits in the news section here. There's this article entitled "The Future of Data Storage."
Yeah, the future.
Guess what that future was purported to be?
Well, I mean, the problem is that clearly we're about to hit our data storage limits here in 1997.
There's like 3 different references in here. As data storage capacity nears its limits.
Look, their high-end PC in the PC section had a 9 gigabyte ultra SCSI hard drive. it's going to be hard to ever get past the 9 gigabyte barrier. If
You're
we're
never
being
going to
real.
make it just like warp. You can't make it to 10 gigabytes.
No, that's impossible.
Ever. Traditional storage is rapidly approaching a point where further leaps in data capacity will no longer be possible.
No longer be possible.
Like,
Brad, you know what I'm holding in my left hand
what's
right
that?
now? It's a 256 gigabyte thumb drive. I bought it for $8 from the internet.
Yep. After 35 years of consistent increases in storage capacity, new technology has pushed the. I have no idea what their basis is for claiming that storage just can't get bigger after this.
Well, okay. So I'm going to tell you how this happens. A press release goes out that says revolutionary new technology in development at IBM's Almaden Research Center.
Mm-hmm.
And then they say we're reaching the capacity of standard platter drives, which, I mean, in fairness, there's always capacity limits burgeoning. And then somebody figures out a way past them, right? Right. Like the bits used to be laid out flat on the disk, and then we put them vertical, and then we kind of layer them on top of each other, which turns out to have some other problems. And then we just stopped using disks entirely and started using flash memory. This is a path not traveled is the way I would look at this.
Yeah, I guess we're burying the lead here. It's holographic storage. Remember that? This
was a real. This is like the ultimate 90s tech / games journalism chestnut. Next gen holographic storage. It's like those cubes from Star Trek.
Yep. Your PlayStation 2 games are going to ship on cubes.
Man, that would have been so cool. Think of how much faster they would have been than crappy DVDs.
Yeah, I mean, this does say, it doesn't give any numbers, but it does say that these things, the speed of data access was one of the advantages of this medium that never came about.
Well, yeah, because you can flip a mirror around a lot faster than you can spin a piece of carbonite.
I love how buried in like the 8th paragraph of the story. Currently, scientists can store up to 48 megabytes per cubic centimeter.
48 megabytes per cubic centimeter does not seem well. Okay, what's a 2.54 centimeters in an inch? So cubics. If you make a circle with your index finger and your thumb, a cubic centimeter is like the smallest you can make that hole. If your finger's on top of your thumb, and it's a cube, not just obviously a plane.
Yeah.
That doesn't seem like great data density.
No, this says they were shooting for 10 gigabytes per cubic centimeter, but I'm guessing this project was probably dropped long before they got there.
Or maybe this is what we're using. Maybe this is a secret of high-end data storage.
Maybe the secret Skunkworks program inside of IBM is still going.
But I mean, so the cool thing was they did this just like you do holograms photography, where they have 2 light sources hitting at different angles, and like the incidence. Like basically, if you aim your reading laser in from a different angle, you get different data out, which is kind of a trip.
Yeah.
Look, we're always limited by the laws of physics. Next gen.
Yep. That's what they say. The other story here, a very sad story. This was right around the time that Gunpei Yokoi of Nintendo, or formerly of Nintendo at this time, passed away. Tragically,
inventor of the Game Boy.
Yes. Yeah.
The Game & Watch.
Game & Watch, Metroid.
The D-pad, arguably.
Oh, did he was he behind that?
Well, he was on he came up with Game & Watch.
Oh God, I should know this. Does Game & Watch predate the Famicom? I guess it does.
The Game & Watch is the first thing that had a gamepad. Yeah.
Yeah. God, man. Yeah. Momentous contributions to the medium of video games. My understanding is the Game Boy was like looked down upon tremendously inside of Nintendo until it came out.
Really?
Like it was like the people who were not working on the Game Boy kind of treated it like a joke.
I mean, the one color thing would have been hard in that, if you think about what that era was like, saying, hey, you can have video games that are just like the ones on your TV, and then they're kind of a crappy green color.
Yeah. Well, what is the actual palette? Is it 4 shades of gray? I can't remember.
I honestly, I didn't have one.
I think that might be right. I could be totally wrong though. It is a limited palette of different grays.
Yeah.
Anyway,
why did they not like it? Was it just because it was portable?
Yeah, I think the idea of a tiny little thing that barely could run anything was maybe just seen as a toy or something, was my understanding, kind of. And then it came out and of course became their biggest thing ever. And then it was like, oh, who's laughing now?
Yeah. Well, and then followed that up with another single color palette device.
Yeah. He also, I mean, this is kind of shitty. The only picture of a product he worked on that they put in the story was the Virtual Boy, which is like probably Nintendo's biggest failure ever.
Well, the Virtual Boy was fresh. I mean, this is 1997. The Virtual Boy had just come out 2 years before.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and then Nintendo ran him off because of the Virtual Boys, presumably.
Yeah. Yes.
Wow.
Or he may have left on his own, but probably safe to assume the abject failure of that thing had something to do with his departure. I don't have any like homebrewed 3DSs around, but did you see that Virtual Boy emulator for 3DS that came out a while back?
No.
It uses, it
uses the 3D screen?
Yes. Uses the 3D of the 3DS to replicate the 3D of the Virtual Boy.
Somebody made a Virtual Boy emulator for like Steam VR that was pretty good.
Interesting.
It's still a Virtual Boy at the end of the day,
it's cool though. I mean, like for virtual, good or bad, just being able to preserve that stuff so people can see it is super important.
Yeah, and like I remember doing the demo at Hills or Kmart or something when I was a kid, and was like, that is really cool. It's not worth. I can't remember how much the Virtual Boy cost. I remember thinking, wow, that is really expensive. I would rather just buy 3 normal games.
How much did that cost? Actually, I don't know. Virtual Boy MSRP. I'm going to guess I was going to guess $149, $179.99.
Yeah. See, $179 in 1997, 1995 money was basically $1,000 in today money.
370 as of last year.
Yeah, that's a lot.
What did they ship? Like 3 games for that thing? I think.
I think there were 20 total.
Oh God, were there? Maybe you're right.
Wrong.
I thought there were like almost none. I can tell you. Oh yeah, 22 games. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. That's a thing. All right.
Yes. Anyway, tragic loss for everything that he contributed to video games.
He died in a car accident
kind of a freak accident. Like, I don't know if we need to get into it.
Don't get out of your car after you have an accident on a freeway or something. That's the lesson.
Involved in a fender bender, pulled over and got out, and then was struck by another oncoming car.
Sucks.
Let's see here. Do you want to talk about the Professional Gaming League?
Oh, the PGL. You mean?
Yes. I assume it's Professional Gaming League. I don't actually see in front. I only see the acronym here. What else would it stand for?
So that's it. Professional Gaming League. Yeah. Or maybe it's Professional Gamers League. I can't remember, but it was, the idea was,
it is gamers actually. Yes.
It's funny because this is just around the time that Gamers was like Mountain Dew and some ad agency were coming up with the way to describe people who played video games on the internet.
Oh yeah. This was not long before Thresh's gamers.com would launch.
Yeah. Well, and it was after like 10 and Heat and M Player, which were these kind of pre or early internet kind of matchmaking services that would let you like, for example, if you wanted to run like a Quake League in 1997, you would go set up a team on a website someplace, and then they would match you with other teams, and eventually you'd get into a league where it was more people, more or less your skill level, so you wouldn't get wrecked. Kind of like if you're playing like in a softball team for your place of work, right?
Yeah. 10 TEN, is that the Entertainment Network?
I believe that was the Entertainment Network, which started as a place where you could play spades and hearts with your friends on the internets.
No, was that Sierra Online's?
There were a bunch of them. 10 Sierra Online ended up buying 10. That was what you used to play Half-Life multiplayer, Half-Life 1 multiplayer.
That would make sense.
You could also play Quake through that. Like it would hook into, I think Quake used GameSpy. Is that right? Oh wait,
I'm sorry. Is that the Total Entertainment Network?
It might be the Total Entertainment Network.
Founded and launched in September 1996.
Yeah, that seems right.
Succeeded by Pogo.com.
Everybody loves Pogo. Didn't that get bought by EA eventually?
That might be right. Skimming this article as we speak. But it looks like it was acquired by venture capital eventually.
Well, anyway. So the point though was that if you like, there were ways that you could climb these ladders, right? And on the individual networks, but you couldn't, there was no like, once you got to the top of your ladder on 10 or Case's ladder or one of these services, then you were just like the best in your pond. The idea here is that they would take pros like Thresh and put them on teams and pit them against each other. And you'd have like games that were 1-on-1, games that were 2-on-2, 3-on-3. And they started out with, I think, Quake and Red Alert. Is that right? Yeah. Gamers can compete in Quake and Red Alert matches. Okay. So according to this, gamers could play in Quake and Red Alert matches for a total of more than $250,000 in cash and prizes. that was across multiple events and across the entire season. So it was like, I think a 10 or 12,000 per game basically was the most somebody could take home. But this was the first time I remember hearing about this, like an esports type thing, before they called it esports even.
Yes, way before, ahead of its time.
It was just called professional gaming.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Also written by Christian Svensson, which I think is really funny. I forgot he worked for Next Gen back in the day.
Yes. Do you know where he's at now?
He's at Sony.
Oh, Sony. Okay. Wasn't he at Capcom for a long time also?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or maybe I don't know him. I don't
think I overlapped with Christian at all, but he was around.
Inside baseball here, but I've heard the name for years working at video game publishers and so forth. Anyway.
One of those people that has been in games for a very long time.
Yeah. Yes. Which is like, frankly, half the masthead of this magazine, of this issue, is made up of people like that.
Yep.
That you still hear about working at major publishers and stuff now. What else have we not covered here?
Can we talk about this Half-Life ad on page 153, I think? 154? Sure.
Yes.
154. It's a weird ad, right? Like, it's the Half-Life. This is prior to the release of Half-Life 1. Nobody knows what Half-Life is. I think the demo might have been out by now.
Oh, you know what? That did not occur to me when you flagged this earlier. This is like a full year before Half-Life actually came out.
Yeah, because it came out in like fall of 98.
Yeah,
right?
like November 98, I believe.
Yeah, so like it's a spread ad, and the one side is a screenshot, but on top of it is what looks like a model wearing one of those ninja suits with the crossbow from the game,
and like big old kind of night vision goggles looking head contraption.
So like, props to Valve for not making her real sexy, because that would have been a weird thing to do.
Yeah, or Sierra even. I wonder if Sierra put this ad together.
I'm sure this is, well, it has the Valve logo on it. It does say play the demo at sierra.com/Half-Life.
Yeah, the Sierra logo's at the bottom. They published Half-Life, so
okay. But yeah, it's a weird, like, putting the human player on top of the screenshot that is a choice, man.
Yeah. Yes. And also, like way before Gordon Freeman would become iconic.
Yeah. Who the hell's Gordon?
So they didn't even put him in. Of course, maybe they even have a design for Gordon at this point.
No, there was a demo out. That Day Zero thing was out by now.
You're right. Play the demo. Yes. I completely forgot there was that early demo of Half-Life.
Yeah. You got it if you bought a specific video card, I think. Right.
Okay.
It was their way of tricking people into buying video cards so that there'd be everybody'd have 3D accelerators when Half-Life came out.
Day Zero? Is that what you said?
I think it's called Day Zero.
Man, I have to go look that up. I probably played that somehow when it came out, but I have no memory of it.
It was very easy to pirate, if I recall.
Yeah.
Might have been Day One.
Day One. I believe it's Day One. Is what I'm seeing here.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Do you want to, let's see, any other ads we've got? You mentioned this weird Crash Bandicoot ad.
Yeah, there's a Crash Bandicoot ad. Hold on, I don't have the page number for it, but it kind of grabs you. There's two.
It's like 26-ish, roughly page 26.
Yeah,
Crash Bandicoot 2.
And it's like a bunch of really ripped bodybuilder looking guys, and then on a lineup for some reason, like a police lineup.
Like these are like full on Muscle Beach looking, like world competitive bodybuilder types.
They're like characters. They're so over the top. They're almost like caricatures.
Yeah.
And then there's Crash, who also is orange, just like the bodybuilders. I think. I don't understand why this ad is here, but like, okay.
90s video game advertising, man.
It was a weird time for everyone, but especially video games.
Yes. Also, I'm just going to say it again. I'm just going to keep harping on this. Go watch that Andy Gavin Crash Bandicoot video. It is absolutely fascinating if you want to see some early PlayStation development behind the scenes.
I am into that. Let's see. Do we want to talk about the next game from the makers from the Motor Tune design team?
Yeah, like I didn't. So there's a preview for Gran Turismo in here, the first one.
You mean an alpha? It's in the alpha section, Brad. That's how you know it's a preview.
And that was way before the term alpha was in wide use in the bigger gaming community, since it's become.
Oh, you think?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I feel like that became a thing. People knew about that after Q-Test Alpha came out in like 95.
I think they were. But what I mean is when marketing got a hold of those terms and started pitching like, hey, pre-order the game and you can play in the beta.
Yeah.
And then a couple of years after that, they were like, hey, how can we make it sound even more exclusive and bleeding edge than beta? What if we call it an alpha?
And for what it's worth, I think that this is probably around the time that alpha Like, in the old days, alpha meant, hey, we have features in and we're going to make things work right now and balance.
Right.
And now alpha just means, hey, it's going to crash.
Right.
So
like we've got alpha now just means like we've got some polish left to do before launch.
Yeah. So anyway.
Yeah. Anyway, in the alphas section, a game called Gran Turismo, which they just repeatedly go out of their way to mention, is coming from the MotorTune team.
I've never heard of MotorTune before, Brad.
MotorTune Grand Prix is the only one I know of. I don't know if there are even others, actually. And I also don't know if they came out here. I think at least Grand Prix did. And I also, I don't think I've ever played it. I couldn't tell you if it's exactly a Mario Kart analog or if it's maybe a little bit different, but it's a silly racing game.
They describe it as more popular in Japan than in the US, and beneath the deceptively cute, even goofy surface lies crisp control and graphic excellence.
Yeah, look,
there you go.
They proved themselves with a goofy game, and then cue 25 years of the most obsessive automobile video game development ever.
It's funny because the GT team is like 7 people at this point.
Yeah, at this time, there's a picture of them, and it's a small enough team to sit around one side of a table.
Yeah.
I went to the were they Polyphony Digital at this point? I'm not sure if they had a name at this point.
They were the MotorTune team, I think.
Somewhere,
publisher, developer, SCEI.
Somewhere around, I don't know, in the 2003 to 5 range. I went to the Polyphony Digital office in Japan.
Oh, cool.
Their parking garage, or it's not a garage, but their parking lot is on their roof.
Okay.
Like take a car elevator up there to park your car.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
I assume. I'm guessing actually, but I certainly didn't see enough room for like a corkscrew,
Look, maybe it's like a Fast and the Furious situation where you have to go on the building next door and just jump down.
To drift your way across.
Yeah, like do a sick drift off the edge and then land in your space.
It may shock you to hear there were a lot of like very nice and exotic and interesting cars.
Weird.
Like muscle cars, racing cars. Anyway.
I'm not super surprised.
Yeah, it's kind of funny though to see like Gran Turismo was just a game that was being worked on here and not the phenomenon it would become.
Like that's the thing that struck me is it's the only time I've ever seen Gran Turismo presented in media as not a highly anticipated, because like by the time the second one came out, it had established itself as like, hey, we're like racing sim. We're going to mount some microphones all over the chassis and in the engine compartment and inside the cockpit so that we get a perfect sound modeling of each of these 87 cars or whatever we put in the game.
Yeah. I think the name MotorTune appears like 6 times in this preview. So they had not quite established all of their cred yet.
I like the quote from the developer, which is, I want the game to become an OS for racing games like Windows 95 is for computers.
Holy shit, I missed that. That's incredible.
That is amazing. I was going to say, this was probably the thing that people bought the analog controller for, right? For the PlayStation?
Yes. I'd have to go look at the dates. Like, Ape Escape is the first thing that comes to mind for me when the dual analog came out, which was separate from the Dual Shock.
Yeah.
The dual analog did not have force feedback.
Course.
Was it the case that they bundled Ape Escape with a dual analog? That might be why I associate those so closely. I can't remember, but yes, this was, I believe, Gran Turismo, or maybe 2, one of those.
Was 2 a PS1 game as well?
Oh God, yeah, the first like 4 or 3, or actually, gosh, hang on, I'm not the foremost authority on the Gran Turismo games. Let me check myself. No, GT3 was a PS2 game. That's right.
Okay, so they did 2 for the first one.
Yes,
the first one.
Sorry,
that makes sense. It was
Gran Turismo 3 A spec because they did that PS2 bundle with that game that sold a bajillion units. Anyway, yes, big early dual analog game, I believe.
Who knew it would spawn a successful movie franchise too?
Yeah. God, right. Are they making another one?
I don't have any idea.
Probably.
I mean, I feel like people went to see it. It made $122 million. It cost less than it made. So success.
Yep. There you go.
Let's see what else. You want to talk about a little sequel from a scrappy upstart in the Bay?
Sure.
This was a review. This is from the, what is it called? Finish section? What do they call it? Rating.
Rating appears to be the name of their reviews. Oh no, finals.
Finals. There you go.
Finals is the name of their. You wouldn't be talking about Star Wars Dark Forces 2 Jedi Knight, would you?
I'm going to go ahead and tell you 500 horsepower is a fantastic headline, though.
It's not bad. 5 stars?
5 stars. It was a good ass game.
I listen, I don't want to come off the wrong way. I have nothing against this game.
Wow.
But I've just never, I didn't really play it in its day, to be fair. I was too busy, like, just all Quake all the time.
Yeah.
But 5 stars, like, it's surprising to me. I would have expected 4.
I'm going to tell you this, it captures the entire experience of playing Jedi Knight Dark Forces 2, which is, hey, I'm going through some tunnels. I'm holding up a lightsaber in front of some stormtroopers, and I'm looking at the ground after chopping some dude's arm off.
Okay, that's fair. I get it.
Those were the 3 looks.
When you put it that way, I guess I get it.
Yeah, I mean, you could chop the dude's arm off.
Like, they do basically just lead with the multiplayer support in this review. Now that you mention it, and they kind of barely ever get into the story.
Well, and the multiplayer support was insane because, like, you could give a stormtrooper a lightsaber and just get in there, and like they let you play as any of the characters in the game, including like Ugnaughts and stuff. I think, if I remember right.
With lightsabers.
With lightsabers.
Okay.
Yeah, it was wild. Look, Pablo Hidalgo had not yet taken the mantle of keeper of the lore.
Mm-hmm.
It would not have said there are no Ugnaught Jedi.
Mm-hmm.
So
that you know of.
Yeah, it was pretty good.
Like, looking at this, just it's kind of pound for pound. I mean, 32 player matches, capture the flag, and other modes out of the box. Like, that's pretty robust for a multiplayer game in this time.
Well, and like the thing that was nice about this was it had deathmatch rules, right? So you could play like there were some. I feel like there were different modes, like capture the flag and stuff like that. But you could also just like one-on-one somebody in Bespin if you wanted on a modem, which was cool. That was a thing that none of the other Star Wars games would do.
Yeah. Let's see some other quick review hits. If you're curious, 4 stars for Castlevania Symphony of the Night.
Hold on. Last thing about the Jedi Knight before we go on to Symphony of the Night, a game I've never played.
What?
Look, we've talked about this before.
Oh man.
The Jedi Knight had the structure where you had like a series of increasing boss fights. Like, which sounds weird to treat it as hey, this is a thing, but they presented it as like it did neat story structure stuff that we hadn't really seen on PC shooters up until that point.
Oh, do you mean almost Mega Man style in a way? Not necessarily that you chose your boss, but like, or more of like a rogues gallery of like, here are the people you need to go get.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, it was like, hey, this gang has like 8 people in it, and you've got to go down and hunt each one down. And I think the story was pretty linear. Okay. But it made it introduced them. It would foreshadow that you were going to fight this particular guy. You'd get to see what he was good at, and then you'd have to fight him at the end of the mission. That is a good and underused setup. Yeah, well, it was kind of bonkers for like 1997, 98, whenever this game came out. It was novel. So anyway. But yeah, so this Castlevania is good, I guess. I don't know. 4 stars, Symphony of the Night. The Metroidvania term had not been coined at this point, but you know, at this point they just called it a Metroid-alike. Yeah, you should play that game. It's hard to go back to those games at this point. What? Oh, I don't know about that. They're too hard. I'm old. I think that game is timeless. I don't doubt that, but 4 stars for Total Annihilation. That's a good game. I never played a ton of TA, but I knew people who really liked it. The thing about it was it had a buttload of units, and you could scroll all the way in and all the way out. Yeah, the super high scroll height, ceiling, whatever. Look, Chris Taylor looked deep into the Microsoft IntelliMouse and was like, yo, I get this wheel. I've got this wheel. I got to use it. Yeah, I'm going to use every bit of the wheel. NHL 98, like EA banger for the PlayStation. 4 stars. Yep. It was back when hockey games were good. And there's a Macintosh review section that features Quake and TIE Fighter. Yep. Those were released in 1995, I believe, for the personal computer. They said that the TIE Fighter was all of the content from the expansions and everything for TIE Fighter. For what it's worth, there's a preview of some X-Wing versus TIE Fighter DLC or add-on packs earlier in this game, but the TIE Fighter, they say, hey, they had to put other stuff in. God, make this release. Yeah, this is making me realize this was the era of original
the Mac. It's not even Mac OS, like just the Macintosh operating system.
Yeah,
you know?
no, this
is like System 8 era or something.
System
right?
7, System 8. Yeah, maybe
Roughly.
System 9 by then.
Like I've read and watched enough YouTube videos about development on that version of that operating system to know what a goddamn fucking nightmare it must have been to make these games for it.
It was bad. I also the Quake port doesn't talk about 3D acceleration because I don't think you could 3D. I guess you could. No, you could.
I don't think there were
they had
drivers.
Rage Pros.
Were there?
Yeah,
Pre
G3, G4.
Are you sure they had?
Yeah, because they released Q3 test. Oh no, because it wasn't 3D accelerated. Yeah, no, Q3 required 3D acceleration. He released Q3 test earlier on Macs.
But that was only on OS 10 derivatives or variants, I believe.
Oh, maybe. I don't know. We should.
I don't think Quake 3 ever ran on original Mac OS. I keep wanting to call it Mac OS, even though that wasn't actually the name, right?
It's been a minute.
I remember reading enough plan files about how much they absolutely fucking despise the original Macintosh OS.
I can see that. For what it's worth, to jump back to TIE Fighter, there's a TIE Fighter redesign / total conversion that uses that X-Wing Alliance total conversion engine.
Interesting.
And they've like remade that game, and it's all like lit and like ray traced, and it looks pretty good.
I should pull that up. That also reminds me, I have not checked in on XWVM in quite a long time.
What is XWVM?
I don't know this for a fact, but I've always assumed what they are going for there is like X-Wing Virtual Machine. Is kind of what is the riff that they're going for with the name, because what it is a fully brand new engine that just takes the data files from the missions and so forth from the original game.
Gotcha.
It's basically a new interpreter. It's a new engine, but it's like super nice, high res, modern lighting, modern everything.
So this TIE Fighter upgrade is based on X-Wing Alliance upgrade, which is another like TC for / engine redo for X-Wing Alliance. And you basically you open up the Palpatine configurator and you say, hey, you want to switch to the dark side, and then point it to your TIE Fighter campaigns.
And then you get the sick forearm tattoo then.
Yeah. Well, so right now there's a bug where if you do two things, then the forearm tattoo might be overwritten, and like they don't have a solve for that yet, but they're working on it. Okay.
Right. That's cool.
It's pretty good. I played a little bit last night.
Sorry. The other thing I'll mention about XWVM, you should look it up. They added VR support at some point. I don't think it's still out as of now.
I wonder if this is what became X-Wing Alliance upgrade. No, it sounds very similar.
No, because that thing is a full from the ground up, brand new engine, brand new everything. It's not based on any pre-existing game.
I think that's what this is too.
I'm pretty sure these are completely separate. XWVM has been in development for a very long time.
Okay. Yeah, XWA is just a mod, not a full redo.
Yeah, but you should go look this up because they put out some videos of the VR support. It looks kind of incredible. Like just
does it have like
lighting.
virtual cockpits and everything?
Yeah. You're full on. It's a full on like very high quality X-Wing cockpit that you're just sitting in looking around. Nice. With like the lighting everywhere.
The thing that was weird for me was when I loaded it up, it like looks great in the cockpit, and then you switch back to the little 320 by 200 cutscenes where the lips the mouths just go up and down like a 80s webcomic.
It's quaint.
Anyway, it's fine.
I have to mention before we wrap up here, they reviewed an arcade game.
They reviewed arcade games all the time. This was Game Pro did that too.
Did they?
Yeah.
Man, that's like, well, to be fair, by the time I got into the game, arcades were not much of a thing, or becoming not much of a thing.
Or it was rapidly. Like where something would get ported over from one of the other platforms, right?
Yeah, but I don't remember like EGM ever really reviewing arcade games. Anyway, they straight up gave 3 stars to Mortal Kombat 4, which seems about right.
Seems generous to me. Bad game.
I can see a 3. I mean, it's not great, but I can see it.
But yeah.
Anyway, that's just about everything. There's not a ton in the letters section.
I was gonna say one thing that I do like is that there's a section in the back where it's like, hey, we are a studio. Stormfront Studios is looking for outstanding programming talent at every experience level. We're north of San Francisco. We're blah, blah, blah. And it's like, hey, come send your resume to us and come work for us, which is cool. There's
kind of a surprising number of like there's a couple others, I think, as well.
There's quite a few. Yeah.
Tiburon.
Current job biting you in the ass. Bite back. Work on monster hints like Turok Dinosaur Hunter that put you at top of the food chain.
This is still Tiburon Entertainment in Maitland, Florida, soliciting for developers.
Is that the same Tiburon that got bought by EA, or is that different
Yes,
Tiburon.
they're the Madden studio.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
To this day, but I think they're already owned by EA at this point because I see a little EA logo at the bottom.
Oh yeah, sure enough. Slackers need not apply.
But they became EA Tiburon at some point, which
Weird.
they're not here yet. Anyway, let's see. There is a mention of the 3DO M2 cancellation in the letters section.
Oh man,
M2 was the very hyped follow up to the original 3DO that was DOA, never actually came out. I think there are some dozens of numbers of units out there somehow.
I don't know that I ever saw a 3DO
or something like that.
original even.
A friend of mine had an FC1, straight up the original Panasonic very first release of the 3DO. So I got to see quite a bit of 3DO when I was a kid, which was pretty wild.
Pretty exciting.
He in fact, that friend was all in on the M2. Like he had cast his lot with 3DO and was going to go down with the ship.
Never forget.
Never got to buy one. Let's see. The only other thing I have from this issue is something we forgot to touch on with the Underground Games, the indie games article.
Yeah.
I think we just kind of swerved away from it before I remember to mention here. There's a couple sidebars in here that are pretty interesting. They talk about the Net Yaroze, which was that black PlayStation. You ever seen a picture of a black PlayStation 1?
Oh, yeah. This is the one that you could do dev on, right?
Yes. So, and I don't think don't quote me on this. I was going to say, I don't think it came out outside of Japan, but maybe it did get a US release actually. This says, well, maybe it was. Yeah, I guess it was out in the US. This says it was $800 at the time.
That's cheap for a dev kit.
Yeah. But this thing points out, this sidebar points out that if you wanted to release anything commercially, you had to go through Sony. And that kind of violates the spirit of this article where they're saying like, indie games need to come from the hearts of the people making them. And they straight up say any game that actually does get published through Sony will by that time be so sanitized, it will probably not qualify for underground status anymore.
Got to be underground, man.
That's right. Can't sell out. Cannot sell out to the man.
I was gonna say I wondered where this fell in terms of Newgrounds, because that was where a lot of this kind of stuff came from. There wasn't really a path from, hey, I'm making weird stuff in Flash that's a game, to I want to release games on console until this point. And they didn't really talk about that here, which I thought was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
And I wondered if it was before, but Newgrounds came out in 1995, started in 1995.
Oh, that's way earlier than I would have thought.
Yeah, I don't think it got bigger until later, it looks like anyway.
That would make sense. They also mentioned something I did not know existed. There is a version of BASIC for the Sega Saturn here listed as well.
Okay, so you can make a turtle drawer program for your Sega Saturn?
They make the sickest version of Gorilla you've ever seen.
Oh, hell yeah.
Snake all day long.
Snake might be too fast for BASIC, man.
How many snakes you can fit on screen at one time? The actual name of that, I looked it up earlier. Here they just listed as Sega Saturn BASIC. Game Basic for Sega Saturn, I believe, is the actual name of this.
Was it a disc you put in?
I don't know what it shipped on. I'm looking at SegaRetro.org. It looks like it was a CD-ROM.
Huh.
I don't know how you typed into it. Maybe they assumed there was some kind of keyboard add-on.
I don't know.
Oh my God, what? So peripheral supported Saturn floppy drive. I had no idea there was a floppy drive for the Saturn.
Well, there you go. That's probably the only reason it existed.
Learn something new every day. That probably had a keyboard.
Yeah, I imagine.
And then the last thing I wanted to touch on is they have a whole page here devoted to here's how you might be able to get started making your own underground games. Here are some of the tools you might need.
Ooh.
And this is a good illustration of the thing we talk about periodically, which is it used to be very expensive just to be able to program and make software.
Yeah.
The cornerstone for any affordable development should be CodeWarrior Pro from MetroWorks, available for PC and Macintosh at a cost of roughly $600. The CodeWarrior development environment provides a complete editing, compiling, and debugging environment for C and C++, Java, and Pascal.
Wow.
The CodeWarrior compiler is fast, graphical interface, blah, 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 easy to learn, blah, blah, blah. They go through but think about that. The budget development IDE development environment and compiler at this time was $600 in mid-90s money.
Yeah, I mean, Visual C++. Microsoft sold Visual C, Visual Java, and all those others. Visual Studio as a bundle for about the same price.
Right.
But I think games were Code Warrior probably.
Right. Like we talk all the time about how democratized programming has become these days in terms of the free tools and compilers and so forth that are available out there.
3D Studio Max, which is in the 3D section, cost $2,000.
Yeah. Yes.
It's crazy.
And I believe that was the cheap option at that time, because I knew people, most of them were pirating these things, but I knew people that used other packages like Maya and Softimage at this time, and those things were like thousands of dollars ahead, if I'm not mistaken. So like 3D Studio Max, I think, because Max is like the standard now, right? Pretty much. I mean, I know Maya is still big.
People use Max. People use, like, the thing is, people mostly use a mixture of tools now at this point. But yeah, they'll work in one. But yeah,
I remember before Max, when it was just 3D Studio and it was seen as like the entry level one. But they talk about Glide from 3DFX. It is absolutely free. Allows for the use of certain graphics functions on 3DFX Voodoo cards. Anyway, some interesting early game development stuff in here.
I mean, it's hard to overemphasize how hard it was to get started on this stuff before things like even it took another 15 years for a Unity and Unreal to get inexpensive, or to charge you based on what you sell instead of downloading the software, downloading the license. Yeah.
One last tidbit I have to, in the Code Warrior section about getting your hands on a compiler, I have to read this. There is a cheaper option still. Though the environment does not make available all the features of Code Warrior Pro, the absolute lowest cost solution going is Linux, combined with one of the freeware C++ compilers for Linux. Look at the spelling of Linux.
They misspelled Linux.
Linix.
Oh, I got to give Charles some grief about this next time I see him.
Linux, not exactly a household word at this time.
No, definitely not. But
also, to be fair, Minix, the thing that Linux is kind of a takeoff of, it does spell with two I's.
I mean, they definitely didn't have a style guide for Linux at this point.
Yeah.
At linux.org.
Yes.
This is another no byline article. It's really weird.
Yeah. So look, they've all got plausible deniability.
Yeah.
Nobody has to take responsibility for this historic injustice.
Yeah. First mention of Linux in a mainstream gaming publication. They got it wrong.
Yep.
Look at this Duke Nukem Forever. It's like a 4-page. No, it's just a 2-page spread, but there's a 3DFX ad right before that I thought was the same ad.
Right. I did see that. Yes. There's this. Any mention of Duke Nukem Forever at this time did not age well.
Sorry, this is Duke Nukem 64, which did actually ship.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, we should wrap it up here. I think this is again, it's the Next Gen December 1997 issue. It's a big white cover with a power plug, North American power plug on the front.
Yes. Yeah, I'll put a link to the archive.org page for this if you want to follow along in the magazine. I should have mentioned that at the top.
Yeah, volume 3, number 36, for people who are curious. From the world's #1 computer and video game authority, Next Generation Magazine, and Imagine Media publication.
Yeah, like we're obviously not a games podcast, so I was like I didn't know what to expect when we went into this, but I was pleased at how much like game development and culture and business and other, all sorts of other stuff was in here as well.
Next Gen was always really cool. Like Next Gen was one of those magazines I subscribed to before I worked at Future. And,
I read quite a bit of Next Generation back then as a discerning future professional.
Look, as a friend who worked on this magazine or worked at Future around the time said, if everybody who claims to read Next Gen actually read Next Gen, it would be the only games magazine that survived. They shut it down in like 2001, I think.
Yeah. It was nice while it lasted.
Yeah, they had a good run. So that'll do it for us this week. As always, Brad and Will Made a Tech Pod is a listener supported show. That means if you would like to go and support the show, you can go to patreon.com/techpod. Again, that is patreon.com/techpod. And where for $5 a month, you get access to the fabulous TechPod Discord full of beautiful nerds who like the same kind of things that you do, most likely. Topics this week have been all over the place. We were talking, I was in one of the threads where we were talking about what happened, like one of the last week's episode, I guess. And we had a really, really extended conversation about that New York Times language quiz where everybody was putting in where they live and taking the quiz. And like some of them are really, really incredibly precise, especially in the Northeast. Some of them are all over the place. So it was really funny. Really, really good chat. And again, it's patreon.com/checkpod. It's $5 a month. You also get access to the patron exclusive episodes where we talk about what we're working on. Sometimes I load up Twitch and just take calls for an hour or two. we've done all sorts of stuff there. It's a place for us to experiment and kind of try out new stuff.
Yeah.
And yeah, we appreciate the support. As always, we want to thank all of our patrons. Thank you, patrons.
Thank you, patrons.
But we want to give a very special thank you to our executive producer tier patrons, including Andrew Slosky, Paddle Creek Games makers of Fractured Veil, Jordan Lippett, Bunny Fiend, Twinkle Twinkie, David Allen, James Kamek, and Pantheon, makers of the HS3 high-speed 3D printer. Thank you all.
Thank you.
And I guess that'll do it for us this week. We will be back next week, back again in the future. I don't think it's Q&A. Your Q&As are coming. No, this next week is the Q&A episode again.
God, really?
Yeah, it's a weird shaped month, July.
We pushed the Q&A back a week.
Yeah, because you were out.
Yes. So
yeah, if you have questions, send them to podcast at techpod. Pod. Damn
Find it.
If you have questions, you can send them to techpod@content.town.
There it is.
Or if you're in the Discord, you can post them in the questions Q's Seeking A's channel, and we will turn those Q's into A's next week. Until then, we'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.